Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What is happening, Rush Nation? Here we are. We're into week 4 of the NFL, week 4 waiver wire. At the end of this week, we're going to be a quarter of the way through the fantasy season, pretty much. And so it's about that time where if you haven't got the win on the board, you need to make some big moves. If you have got some wins on the board, you need to think about where your team can get stronger. And if you're 3-0, you need to start thinking about the postseason and what moves you can make now to help you get there. A lot of strategy stuff. We're going to do a lot of this on the Patreon cast this week as to targets, places, teams and players that are on the ascendancy and players that you can go and trade for and try and find yourself into a better position to win matchups and get into the postseason and beyond. But then also, if you're in that motion of maybe you're in the position to sell in a dynasty league, for example, what you can maybe try and get for these players so that you don't get hoodwinked, and think about this roster rotation, and as well as also thinking about redraft, how you should stack your benches now the buys are going to start coming into play very, very soon. So lots to think about, lots of strategy to be played. A lot of that's going to be played out in the waiver wire. We'll talk a little bit on the show on Thursday as well. So make sure you tune across the network the rest of the week. But let's get into the waiver wires. We'll start with the quarterbacks as always. It is a little thin out there at quarterback. It's going to be pretty much the same guys I mentioned last week, which is, Sam Darnold. He's about 20% owned. You can get him for no more than $1 or $2. People aren't picking up. People aren't buying on it. He didn't have an amazing week, 218 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, but they played the Saints, and the Saints are just pretty terrible. And now the Seahawks have got a great opportunity because now they're going to play Arizona next, whose secondary are just absolutely destroyed. So they've got a great opportunity to get in here and actually put up some points. So for me, he's a sort of a top 16 to 20 quarterback rest of the season. If you're kind of struggling, waiting for quarterbacks to come back, he's a good option for you to be targeting for sure. Other players you can consider, Geno Smith. It's going to be a very up and down ride. Great week 1, not a good week 2, better week 3. He's got Chicago, Indianapolis, Tennessee next. So, you 28, 29% owned you're looking at. I think for me, he's got a pretty decent couple of games coming up, and he can do what they need him to do. But it is going to be a bit of an experience, that sort of up and down experience. So I wouldn't necessarily have him over Darnold or over Stafford, but he is going to give you something if you're desperate. And speaking of Stafford, he's still out there, 31% owned. He had a pretty good week 3. Again, you can get him for $1. The concern with him is going to be injuries, but Indianapolis, San Francisco, Baltimore next. He's going to be involved in some shootouts, so it should really help having him. But as long as the back holds up, he should be fine, and you should be okay. So same quarterbacks as last week. They're still not really getting regularly picked up. Stafford, of the 3 of those, probably has the true nature of a sort of a safest floor and probably the most upside given that potent offense, but Sam Darnold's pretty much there as well, so they should be your primary options. The number 1 waiver wire this week, getting into running backs, is we're sort of at the first player of the season that we say you'd be probably emptying a lot of your fab on, and that's Trey Benson. So Trey Benson is 49% owned, so in a lot of leagues he is going to be gone. But he is still owned not owned in just under half of leagues. I imagine most people listening to this, Trey Benson isn't on their waiver wire, but in the off chance of the years, you should do some due diligence and go and add him. James Conner received a season-ending injury, in which it's pretty much now confirmed that he will be out. So Benson has got a significant upside where when the injury came out and Conner came out of the game, Benson played 87% of Arizona's snaps, and he had a 50% route participation rate. That's going to be huge. So if those numbers trend, now Emery DeMarcado is the other guy, and you might want to add him off the waiver wire as a what happens if Trey Benson gets injured scenario. So Emery DeMarcado is someone you could probably get for a couple of dollars. I would add him, but I would as a handcuff, but he's not going to get too much work in this league. I think Trey Benson is the guy you probably want to be emptying somewhere between 50 and 60% of your fab, especially if you're 0-3, 1-2, you probably want to spend a bit more unless you're really deep at the position, and you could probably go up to 75% of your fab. I'm not saying he's going to be a league winner, but it's going to be hard to see where there is a potential better opportunity now because the competition behind him is so flat, and we've seen the usage granted in a really short sample size. So I would be looking at Trey Benson as probably like the must add of the week, but I appreciate he's probably going to be gone in most leagues. Everyone else that I talk about here at the running back position, I'm just not really enamored with in terms of dropping any significant fab. You can certainly add them, but they're not players that are going to be doing a great deal. Ollie Gordon is probably the next one. He's rostered in sort of 20%-ish of leagues. We're starting to see him get some touches. He got a 2-yard run. He was a player who looked pretty good in the draft process, but had a terrible 2024, which kind of dinked him to get into the 6th round. And he's obviously a really good value for that. He's usurped Jalen Wright, who can't stay fit. So ultimately, he is the back to Devon Achane. The backup to Devon Achane. Devon Achane has a tendency to pick up niggles and injuries. So Ollie Gordon is very much a handcuff back. He's worth definitely a couple of dollars of fab, but he is getting some usage. Probably not enough to be flex worthy, but that could increase as the season goes on. Tyler Magic continues to get mentioned. He's about 40% owned. So he's up there for consideration, and he's someone that you can roster. But again, he's going to have low-end flex appeal with some handcuff ability. Tajay Spears is probably the guy I'd be plucking up here. I talked about him last week. He's just under 40% owned, so the needle did move a little bit. He should be close to return. He's definitely more explosive than Pollard, and Pollard, as much as he's getting all the work, isn't getting those goal line opportunities. He isn't getting in between the 20s, and I think Tajay Spears could bring something a little bit different and a bit of upside there. So you can get him pretty cheap, a couple of dollars, because he won't be playing for a couple of weeks. Stash him on your IR, and you'll be good to go there. So he's a player I'd be looking at for sure. Brain Allen is still available in sort of 55-60% of leagues. Again, similar player if something happens to Breece Hall. But again, we're talking handcuffs here. There's not much here. The other opportunities, and these are ones I've already talked about last week, so it's kind of samey. Chris Rodriguez is the handcuff to Bill Krosky Merritt. You can grab him. He's 6%. He's worth an ad for sure. He's definitely going to give you some value. Jeremy McNichols had a great touchdown. He's 1% owned, but I don't think you're going to get the value out of him. Maybe it's a low-end flex play, but he's one I definitely sort of add, because if you can get him cheap. Woody Marks is probably the guy if I'm looking outside. So I see there's 3 guys or 4 guys if I add Emery DeMarcado that I'm looking to sort of add actively. Obviously Benson, but he's most likely gone. So Woody Marks is probably, for me, the next man up. He's just under 15% owned. And Woody Marks, for me, again, I talked about this last week ago. This is last week's with Nick Chubb and his injury record. But Joe Mixon, he might not come back. Woody Marks is, again, in that passing game, getting more and more usage. That utilization is going up. And he's a player that I think you can really add. We look at his snap share. 12% it was in week 1, 28% in week 2, 49% this week just gone. Route share 9% to 23% to 44%. So we are starting to look at more and more usage for Woody Marks, and it's trending towards Woody Marks either becoming the starter or at least the 1B. So I'd be adding him in most leagues. And Kyle Manangai, injuries to Swift, he could be a guy that I'd be looking to pick up, 13% owned. He's definitely going to have some options here as well. Again, another player that I think is you sending up. So these are players that I would be looking at in particular. We're going to switch to the wide receivers now. There's a few here. One I've talked about, I think, on every Waiver Wire show. He's still under 25% owned, is Eilick Iomenor. He was wide receiver 24 in week 2. It's continuing to trend up for him. If you're calling to first fantasy data share, fantasy points, 21% target share, 26.8% first read share, 1.44 yards per route run. everything is dipping. I mean, everything's going in the right direction. His target share dipped a little bit in week 3, but he's still got some yardage. It's still trending well for him. I'm looking at Iron Manor, and he is the number one in this. He is going to be an option every week. You should be spending, $8 to $10 on him. But if he's been past this many times and then he didn't have the best week in week 3, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, I could probably just add him a little bit. I could add him a little bit cheaper, but he's a player I'd be adding more and more. Luther Burden is probably one of the really interesting ads. So I'm looking at Luther Burden, and he didn't have a lot. Like, his target share was 10.7 this past week, but he had 101 yards and a touchdown. Route participation was only 31%, which is, again, really poor. But the Bears are trying something different. So this is a difficult one. There is a world in which DJ Moore is not on this team at the end of the season. And I think that's something we have to start considering, because it looks like to me that new management are not enamored with him and that they want to try and get the ball elsewhere. And so he is still a valuable commodity that they could ship for something. So I look at DJ Moore. He is definitely declining. I was kind of like hold, but it's not looking great. And it's the way that he's being used. I guess he doesn't quite fit what Ben Johnson wants in this offense. Luther Burden fits more and more. I'd expect his utilization to increase now that we've had this week here off Luther Burden. So he is a player that I will be looking to acquire off waiver wires a little bit more this week in particular. Troy Franklin still continues to be the strong ad, 34% owned. Talked about him last week. He is a player I will be looking to buy more and more. Again, Romeo Dobbs, he's 24% owned. I know it didn't quite happen for him this week, but I do think there's an opportunity there for him to usurp up, and it will happen. Some guys sort of hovering around for a while that have been on waiver wires. Torrey Horton, his utilization is kind of right up there with Cooper Kupp, so he is definitely well worth an ad for sure. Christian Kirk is loitering around a load of waiver wires, and he's getting back to health, so I would expect him to be snapped up. So these are players I would definitely be picking up more and more and looking to get. And another player I would be looking to grab is Jalen Coker. He looks like, to me, he is going to come back and eat in this offense for sure. So these are players I'd be looking to target as much as possible in the waiver wire. So, running back, not particularly deep, has 1 star. Wide receiver has a lot of players that you could start to target and be picking through. So a lot of them I talked about last week, but definitely Iron Manor seems to be the strong ad. Luther Burden is a guy I'd be stashing, and you can get him now before he cooks, because I just think with DJ Moore, there's something there that he could go. So a player that people should be starting to think about doing something with. And the other wide receiver as well is Trey Tucker. Now, Trey Tucker, target share was about 20%. He ran a route on 93% of the Raiders' dropbacks. This is according to PFF. So if you look at what he's doing, he is starting to get, again, more usage. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to really all pan out for him long term, but he's a player I'd be looking to add because he's got utilization and those peripheral numbers look good. So he's a player, again, I'd be looking to add. Let's talk about tight ends. Let's talk about Oronde Gadsden. So we'll list these out. He's injured. Gadsden came on. 28% route participation rate, which isn't particularly amazing, but it's there. But he got a target on half of his routes run, and that's really important. And, he got 5 for 7 for 46 yards. That's going to get you a top 12 every single week. So Gadsden, for me, is probably the top tight end ad. If there is no Harold Fanning Jr. out there, he's the one I'd be looking to add for sure. If he's not there, or he will be there, the other player I'd be looking to add is Brenton Strange. 25% owned. His numbers are starting to look particularly strong, even though he hasn't quite put it together in the fantasy box score yet. But, 65% route share, 12% target share. He is getting 38 receiving yards a game, and he is getting, according to fantasy points data, that first read share. It's about 14%. So he did lead the receiving yards 61 this past week. The target rate has gone up as well. So he is starting to get into that conversation. I'd be adding him, and he's got the 49ers, Kansas City, and Seattle next. So they should be games with high scoring points. And I'd be looking to add Brenton Strange for a little while longer and have him as a streaming option for sure. Cade Otton is also in that sort of territory. If Mike Evans is out injured, Chris Godwin's not 100%, Emeka Ibuka is ill or got some sort of issue, but I think he'll probably be okay. There's no Jalen McMillan, like someone's got to receive the ball. So it's likely to be Cade Otton, even though we didn't really see anything in week 3. He didn't even get a target in week 3. So this is a strange ad, I grant you, but I would say that Mike Evans is probably likely out for 2 weeks. With him out for 2 weeks, with Chris Godwin, whether he comes back on Sunday, I imagine he probably will, but if not, they're going to need to throw the ball to someone. And I would imagine it's going to be Cade Otton. So Philadelphia, that's going to be a high-scoring game. Seattle could be a high-scoring game. San Francisco, yeah, I would say for me, Otton is in a position here where you're going to see a lot of volume potentially go his way the next couple of weeks. So he's a player I would be adding as well. And you could probably get him for $1 because no one is going to be on him unless they put together the line of thinking that I have here. When it gets to the DSTs, for me, it's the Patriots. 2 of the next 3 weeks, they got Carolina and New Orleans, who are 2 of the worst teams in the NFL. Yes, they've got Buffalo in the middle there, and you might need to think about a potential pivot option there. But for me, New England are definitely the streaming option here. And then as for your kicker, Matt Prater's out there in most leagues. You can get him, or Spencer Schrader has been absolute money this season. They're the 2 kickers I'd be looking to target. That's going to do it for the Waiver Wire. Thank you very much for tuning in. Good luck this week. I look forward to chatting with you all in the Discord. Hit the Discord link below. Join that. You get to ask me questions. I'll answer as many as I can on Thursday night. Put questions in the comments. I'll chat there as well. Please like and subscribe. Really helps us out. But until then, Rush Nation, looking forward to talking later in the week. Good luck. And don't forget, as always, keep rushing.